Clouds and warmer, thunderstorm for late afternoon tomorrow, and the high at 70. I'm Steve Williams on AM 560, The Answer.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. Only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. When it comes to the matters before the courts as it pertains to border security and immigration policy and who has power over said policy, you would expect to hear legal arguments. Well, this is what passes for if it's not Chris Van Hollen talking about margaritas, it's Jasmine Crockett, who isn't technically an officer of the court, and she tells us she's a very good attorney. Well, this is her legal analysis of the Abrego Garcia case, and by extension, presidential power when it comes to immigration.
But here's the reality. As far as I'm concerned, he's a lot less criminal than the person that's sitting in the White House. Because last time I checked, he doesn't have any criminal convictions. I don't even think he has any outstanding cases versus the guy that still had cases pending when he was sworn in on January 20th and also has 34 felony convictions. So listen, I don't want to hear anything from the Republican Party about how they're trying to keep us safe when their fearless leader is actually the biggest criminal thus far that we have seen, because I haven't seen anybody with a rap sheet that looks like the president's.
Sigh. For more on the legal aspects of these cases, please be joined by Will Chamberlain, Senior Counsel at the Article 3 Project. Will, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
With respect to the Supreme Court's late-night action on President Trump's ability to deport individuals. Like this was a group of immigrants in Texas in this case. I'll let you tackle Alito's dissent, which was joined by Thomas. But Josh Blackman, who is a law professor over at George Mason University's Scalia School of Law, called the Supreme Court's frankly, not dissimilar to Alito, said the Supreme Court violated Marbury versus Madison by granting this ex parte injunction against the executive branch. It didn't have jurisdiction to weigh in on this case at this time in the first place.
Yeah, a very bizarre set of behaviors from the Supreme Court on Easter weekend. I don't really know what they were thinking. Josh Blackman's piece pieces actually on this are very, very good. They explain that, basically that what you have is just enormous procedural irregularity because, within 24 hours, the ACLU had gone from the district court asking for an injunction to the Fifth Circuit without even getting a district court opinion. They just said, we're going to treat it as a so-called constructive denial if you don't issue an order within an hour. The Fifth Circuit said, well, no, you need to actually give the district court time to rule on this. You are not the most important people in the world. But then they basically, right before the Fifth Circuit was going to rule, they did the same thing and went to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court gave an injunction. And I think Alito's dissent to this was just obvious. Like, what are you guys doing? The whole purpose here, and we have this whole thing about, the Trump administration is lawless. Well, you guys aren't even following the most basic internal procedures and deciding to reach to enjoin the government. I mean, that was the other issue. There's a general longstanding practice that the courts do not enjoin the president of the United States as a, respect out of the separation of powers, right? Article 3 doesn't get to tell the head of Article 2 what to do and vice versa. But here they enjoined, quote unquote, the government, which would include the president of the United States. So it's an unbelievably sloppy, lawless injunction that shouldn't have been issued. Justice Alito was right. I think, it's an administrative stay, so I think they'll have a chance to review it. I think they'll lift the stay, but if I were on that court, if I were Alito or Thomas, I'd just be flabbergasted with what my colleagues did over the weekend.
Well, they issued an injunction in a case where there was no ruling from any lower court. When does that happen?
Yeah, that's I've never seen anything like it. I've never seen it.
So now we have federal district court judges as well as Supreme Court justices abusing their power while accusing Donald Trump of abusing his. Correct.
And the freak out is over the thing that Donald Trump ran on. Like, it's not like this should have been a surprise to anybody. Donald Trump ran on deporting illegal immigrants. He said, we're going to have the largest mass deportation campaign in American history. And then he won big. So people should have been ready for that. It's kind of obvious it was coming.
Well, we were talking just a bit ago before you joined us about this distinction in Supreme Court jurisprudence between deportation as a civil process versus imprisonment as a criminal penalty. And the cases that suggest that the president does have the power to use deportation as a civil process in such a way that it does not require this vetting argument that is being advanced by those who are trying to prevent the deportations of people here illegally. Is that your view too? Is that the path that the president needs to go down, and perhaps he and Bondi and Miller and others provide an explanation here?
I mean, I think, as for Abrego Garcia, I mean, obviously the path is, they just need to go ahead with proceedings to lift this withholding of removal from El Salvador. That's the thing they need to do there. In terms of the broader context of what they need to do vis-a-vis immigrants, I think vis-a-vis illegal migrants. I mean, you need to give them the, basically set up sort of industrial scale due process, because due process doesn't mean the same thing in all circumstances. Due process just means, in the immigration context, it can mean that something is do you have papers? No, get on the plane. That can be due process. So I think that they need to figure out how to set something up like that just gives that very bare minimum of due process to migrants that can be dealt with in 30 seconds. And then we need to kind of ramp up the funding for that. I think that's another thing. We don't have enough immigration judges. We don't have enough immigration. We don't have enough people who are working in the process of getting these people deported.
Yeah, I mean, there's no vetting on the way in, but now the left wants everybody vetted on the way out.
Yeah, I agree with that. The left created this problem. You facilitated a mass invasion, and now you're leaning on the law to give you a policy victory that you're not entitled to. That's ridiculous.
Can you tell us? I'm sorry. Go on. I didn't mean to.
No, you go ahead. You go ahead. I didn't have a thought.
What happened in Tennessee? That he was allegedly trafficking 7 individuals, and his vehicle was pulled over for speeding. Do you know why he wasn't arrested and charged with that at the time?
I have no idea. I mean, it strikes me as just a very obvious issue. I mean, I guess they gave him a ticket or something.
Yeah,
I don't even know. I'm not even sure what. They gave him a speeding ticket, even though he was driving without a license, speeding with 8 other people, all of whom claimed to live in Maryland with him.
Right, same address.
But he admitted that he was taking them from Texas. It's just you're trafficking illegal aliens. I guess the FBI was just under the impression that we don't prosecute this sort of thing, that we're happy to allow human trafficking to take place within the United States. Maybe they would have cared if it were 10-year-old children or something, but it's trafficking adults, not a big deal. We got bigger fish to fry.
Yeah, I mean so there's a couple things being conflated with Abrego Garcia, right? One is that he's an MS-13 gangbanger, and he's got a documented history of thuggery, and then the other is the process by which he was removed, and the left is trying to I canonize him, which is a bizarre strategy, but go ahead. I mean, once this information continues to get out, you're going to look rather foolish. But in terms of the process and this facilitating his return so that he can get due process that was articulated at the federal appellate court level after the Supreme Court's decision as well, what facilitate means. What, if you were providing advice and counsel to the Trump administration, what would you suggest they do in the Abrego Garcia matter?
Oh, you want to go to the court and essentially make them keep appealing it until they give you an exact definition of what they want you to do, right? I'm sorry, facilitate, too vague. in this context because this is not just a random person sitting in the street. Like he's a Salvadoran citizen in a Salvadoran prison. Mm-hmm. So you put out a declaration. You'd want to make clear that it's up to the Salvadoran government. We don't hold him. So just put that in evidence. I don't know that they've actually done that. And then the second thing is I would go forward and move forward with an attempt to get this withholding of removal to El Salvador lifted. You can do that in absentia, or you could even send an immigration judge down to the U.S. Embassy in El Salvador. And you just start that. I mean, it's not a long process. I think, you give a notification in 30 days, you can have the hearing, and the hearing should take 10 minutes because this withholding of removal is predicated on two things. One, he needs to not be an MS-13 member. He is. Two, it's predicated on El Salvador not being a safe place to be deported to. But Nayib Bukele has made it one of the safest countries in the Western Hemisphere. So there's no basis for this thing to stick if the government challenges it. So they should just challenge it. I think that's the advice I would give them. But certainly, yeah, go ahead.
No, and ultimately, I mean, there's a lot of understandable nervousness after this Supreme Court stay that we were talking about earlier on deportations because of Kavanaugh and Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett. Here we go again with Amy Coney Barrett. But ultimately, do you have any doubt that Trump will be it will be established by the Supreme Court that Trump does have the plenary power that the president has under the Constitution to make immigration policy?
I mean, he doesn't have plenary power to make immigration policy, but they'll affirm the powers that he has that are granted to him by Congress. They'll affirm the Alien Enemies Act. They'll affirm his general authority to deport. They're not going to
right.
They're not going to be completely lawless about this. I'd be shocked if they were. I think it would hurt them. And then when it comes to like individual cases, what you're going to see is that all these people are going to end up getting deported. They're not going to come home. They don't have a right to be here. Like Abrego Garcia is never going to be reunited with his family in Maryland again. Sorry, you never had a legal right to reside in the United States to begin with. You were always an illegal alien. So, however the MS-13 stuff shakes out, it doesn't matter. You're not a citizen. You have no asylum. You're not a legal permanent resident. You need to be in El Salvador. And if you have a problem, you don't want to be in El Salvador in prison, then you need hundreds of thousands of dollars being spent on your legal defense here to be directed to El Salvador, where you can actually deal with a sovereign that holds you in custody. It's as simple as that.
And so ultimately, how you see this playing out is that there's going to be these fits and starts with federal district court judges, the Supreme Court, even as we've seen. But ultimately, it's going to end up being more of a resource issue, as you were describing, with the lack of immigration judges and the procedural infrastructure needed to move people who shouldn't be here out. I mean, that's what you see as sort of fundamentally how this plays out.
Yeah, that's the biggest stumbling block is exactly how much due process are these people going to be entitled to? Because they're entitled to, if they're being detained, they're entitled to some, but that some can be extremely limited. And then that plus the combination of, how much resources are going to be available to, because even with the problem, the Alien Enemies Act might be efficient in one sense, in the sense that it's just, the president has this unilateral authority to declare that there's been an alien invasion, to declare that certain class of people are alien enemies, and to remove them. And that's not subject to judicial review, except for the fact that if you've defined a class of who qualifies for the statute, then the Supreme Court has said, and I doubt they're going to move off this position, that people need to have a chance via habeas or some other mechanism to say, I'm not in that class. That's not me. I'm not Tren de Aragua. Mm-hmm. So I don't know that the Alien Enemies Act is going to be more efficient than the standard removal process, which means that it's really... Go ahead.
The birthright citizenship case, the Supreme Court has agreed to take up. Given what we've seen thus far, what sort of prospect do you give Trump to win on that?
I don't know, maybe 50-50. I think it could go either way.
Oh, you think it's that close?
Yeah, I think it's very close. I think I could easily see it going. It's just going to depend on what the center of the court thinks, and I don't know if they've really ever weighed in on this question. They've seemed a little bit more open to kind of lefty hysterics on immigration than I would have liked. I think that all this should have been ignored. that everybody's wildly overreacting to the smallest thing. So I wonder what they actually think about it. That said, I don't think that I think the people saying there is no birthright citizenship do have the better of the argument, especially based on Supreme Court precedent. Like Native Americans at one point, they were residing within the United States, but they weren't understood to be citizens or people subject to the jurisdiction, and there had to be a law passed to grant Native American citizenship. Well, if that's true, I don't understand why Native Americans would have a worse claim to citizenship than illegal immigrants and the children of illegal immigrants. That doesn't make sense. So, yeah.
With Amy Coney Barrett, I mean, there's a lot of focus on her because, of course, she's a Trump nominee that has made some very curious decisions. I mean, sort of Murphy v. Missouri was the beginning of the dissent, it would seem. And, there's a lot of question. Maybe this is overreaction, too. Get your take on it. That it almost seems like there's a personal animus between Amy Coney Barrett and Trump, or a personal animus that she holds against Trump. And she is contorting herself to oppose him where possible.
Yeah, I'm not sure what she's doing, honestly. It just feels like this sort of attempt to be moderate, which, moderate for moderation's sake. But I don't see it as particularly principled. I mean, she talked a lot about the importance of regular order and now is signing on to an injunction where there wasn't even a stay of the lower court. I feel like the sort of what this is masking is like she's yet a little bit uncomfortable with the Trump movement and MAGA, even though Trump is responsible for why she has her seat. And I think that she's finding ways to kind of justify it. And I think she also just, it's human, but not a good reason. But I mean, she just might be scared by the way that Supreme Court justices constantly get threats from the left. Like, I think that she, that's had an impact on her, is the way that the left has bullied Supreme Court justices. I mean, we got to remember that there was an assassin sent to Brett Kavanaugh's home, or not sent to, but the assassin went to Brett Kavanaugh's home. So I think there's a little bit of that. I don't honestly think she's particularly up to the job. Maybe she'll change, do a little better with these decisions. But I mean, her decision making in the past 3 months has not been particularly impressive. We'll put it at that.
Will Chamberlain, Senior Counsel, Article 3 Project. Will, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's like a hot, steaming cup of information to start your day. It's Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Wow. At the time of this being written, both gold and silver are up some 40%. That's 40% in just 1 year. In fact, this past year, gold has broken all-time historic records by hundreds of dollars an ounce. And unlike all other financial instruments used today, that historic record goes back thousands of years. In times like these, prices have never been better on most collector and gold coins. Fox Valley Coins in Naperville is trying to keep up with demand. So they're paying the most ever